The barren surface of Mars stretched out in every direction, a wasteland of red dust and jagged rock formations. Beneath the endless crimson expanse, the Gale crater concealed a secret that no one on Earth could have predicted. The Mars Expeditionary Unit, MEU, had come for soil samples, atmospheric studies, and geological mapping. What they found was something that defied explanation. Dr. Elena Kale was the first to notice the anomaly. The team's rover, Solace, had been trailing the edge of the crater, mapping the topography with its ground-penetrating radar, when it picked up an unexpected echo. The signal wasn't consistent with rock or ice. It was hollow, like a void stretching deep beneath the surface. Even more peculiar was its symmetry. "This can't be natural," Elena murmured, studying the scan in the outpost lab. She was a xenobiologist, trained to recognize patterns in nature, and what she saw was too deliberate. The tunnel system, if that's what it was, extended miles beneath the surface. Perfectly smooth walls formed intricate networks, spiraling downward in a manner that suggested design. Her heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Captain Vance, you need to see this." Captain Marcus Vance, the expedition leader, leaned over her shoulder, his weathered face creasing into a frown. "Are you saying this is artificial?" "I'm saying it's not natural," Elena replied. "We need to investigate." Vance hesitated. They were already weeks behind schedule, but the possibility of discovering extraterrestrial architecture was too important to ignore. He called a meeting, and within hours, the team suited up and descended into the tunnels. The entrance was barely noticeable at first, a crack in the crater wall, hidden beneath layers of dust and rock. The team used thermal drills to widen the opening, revealing a passage large enough to accommodate them. As they stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply, and a faint hum filled the air. The walls were mesmerizing. They shimmered in the beam of their helmet lights, the surface smooth yet organic, as though grown rather than carved. Iridescent patterns shifted under the light, creating the illusion of movement. This is incredible," Elena whispered. She placed a gloved hand on the wall. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. "It's alive." Garza, a no-nonsense lieutenant, frowned. "Alive how?" "I don't know," Elena admitted, "but it's emitting energy. The walls are radiating a low-frequency signal." Carter, the team's geologist, knelt to examine the ground. "This isn't soil," he muttered, running his scanner over the glittering dust. "It's crystalline. I've never seen anything like it." The team pressed deeper into the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they advanced, their equipment began to malfunction. Compasses spun aimlessly, and their radios crackled with static. "Elena," Vance said, his voice sharp. "What's happening?" She checked her tablet, frustration mounting. "The magnetic interference is off the charts. It's as if the tunnels are distorting the electromagnetic field." "Or shielding something," Garza added grimly. An hour into their descent, they found the first anomaly. It was a footprint, human in shape but far too large, pressed into the crystalline dust. The edges of the print shimmered almost as if it were alive. "No one's been here before us," Carter said, his voice unsteady. "So how—" A low rumble cut him off. The tunnel seemed to vibrate, the walls shifting subtly. The hum grew louder, rising and falling in a rhythmic cadence. It wasn't random. It was almost melodic. "Everyone stay close," Vance ordered, his hand instinctively moving to the sidearm at his hip. "We don't know what we're dealing with." As they moved forward, the tunnel widened into a massive chamber. The ceiling arched high above them, disappearing into darkness. Tendrils, bone-white and glistening, spiraled along the walls, converging at the center where a structure stood, a monolithic column that pulsed with the same faint iridescence as the walls. At its core was a shimmering surface, liquid-like yet perfectly still. Elena stepped closer, her breath catching. This isn't just a tunnel. It's a portal." The team gathered around the structure, their awe mingling with unease. The surface of the portal rippled, casting distorted reflections of their faces. Elena couldn't look away. It felt as though the portal was watching her, pulling her in. Before anyone could react, the surface shifted. A hand emerged, elongated, with too many joints, its pale, membranous skin glistening in the dim light. The fingers curled, testing the air, before retreating back into the portal. Elena's mind raced. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an artifact, it was a gateway. But to where? Or worse, to what? "Seal this chamber," Vance barked, snapping the team out of their trance. "Now!" The engineers scrambled to deploy containment barriers, but the hum intensified, and the walls of the chamber began to pulse more violently. Shadows flickered at the edges of their lights, moving against the natural flow of their beams. "Elena," Garza whispered, his voice trembling. "Do you feel that?" She did. A suffocating pressure weighed down on her chest, as if the tunnel itself was alive and aware of their presence. Something ancient and malevolent stirred, and for the first time Elena felt true fear. "We shouldn't be here," she said, her voice barely audible. But it was too late. The portal shimmered again, rippling as something larger began to emerge. The pulsing glow of the portal filled the chamber, casting distorted shadows that writhed like living things on the walls. Dr. Elena Kale stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The surface of the portal rippled like liquid mercury, reflecting the terrified faces of the team as something massive began to push through. "Stay back!" Captain Marcus Vance barked, his voice echoing through the chamber. His weapon was already drawn, the muzzle trained on the portal. The thing emerged slowly, a hand similar to the one they had seen earlier, but larger and more grotesque. Its skin was translucent, revealing a network of pulsing veins beneath. The fingers were unnaturally long, jointed in ways that defied anatomy. As it gripped the edge of the portal, the walls of the chamber seemed to shudder in response, the tendrils along the walls twitching like nerves connected to the same living organism. The hand was followed by an arm, then a head. The creature's face, or what passed for one, was a nightmarish amalgamation of features. It had no eyes, only deep hollows where they should have been, and its skin stretched tight over an angular skull. Its mouth split open horizontally, revealing rows of needle-like teeth that glistened with some viscous black fluid. It tilted its head as if listening, then emitted a low, guttural sound that resonated in their chests. "Fire!" Vance shouted. The chamber erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing through the tunnels. The creature recoiled, its translucent skin charring where the bolts struck, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a deafening screech that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Elena clamped her hands over her ears, the sound piercing and unnatural. The creature lunged forward, moving with a speed that defied its size. It swiped at one of the engineers, its elongated fingers slicing through his suit like paper. Blood sprayed as the man crumpled to the ground, his body convulsing. Elena caught a glimpse of the wound, black veins spreading outward from the gashes, his skin bubbling as if melting from the inside. "Fall back," Vance yelled, firing another round. The team retreated, dragging the injured man with them, but the creature didn't pursue. Instead, it turned its attention back to the portal, stepping fully into the chamber. It stood there for a moment, its head tilting again, as though assessing its surroundings. Then it raised one of its grotesque arms, touching the walls. The tendrils responded immediately, writhing and curling toward it, as if in reverence. "What the hell is it doing?" Garza muttered, his weapon shaking in his hands. Elena stared, her scientist's mind racing to understand. "It's communicating. The tunnels, they're alive, and it's connected to them." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate. The walls pulsed more violently, the iridescent patterns shifting into something chaotic and disorienting. Elena felt a wave of nausea as the air seemed to thicken, making it harder to breathe. "We have to move," she shouted, but her voice was nearly drowned out by the rumble. The team stumbled back the way they had come, dragging the injured engineer between them. As they fled, the walls of the tunnel seemed to close in, the once smooth surfaces now pulsating like the throat of some great beast. The hum that had been so faint earlier was now a deafening roar, and Elena felt a growing pressure in her skull, as though something was trying to force its way into her mind. They turned a corner and stopped abruptly. Standing in the middle of the tunnel was another group of people. No, not just any group. It was them. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she saw her own face staring back at her. The duplicates were identical in every detail, from the worn patches on their suits to the fear in their eyes. The only difference was their expressions. Where the real crew looked panicked, the doppelgängers wore blank, almost predatory smiles. What the hell is this?" Garza whispered, his voice trembling. The duplicate, Vance, stepped forward, his movements unnaturally fluid, like a marionette on invisible strings. When he spoke, his voice was distorted, a garbled echo of the captain's. "Leave," it said, the single word reverberating through the tunnel. Elena stepped back, her heart pounding. "It's mimicking us. They're not real. They're part of this." The doppelganger Elena moved next, her head cocking at an unnatural angle. Her mouth opened, stretching wider than it should have, and a sound emerged, low and guttural, the same sound the creature in the portal had made. "Get ready to fire," Vance ordered, raising his weapon. The duplicates lunged, moving with inhuman speed. Plasma bolts tore through the tunnels, striking the imposters, but they didn't stop. The duplicate Garza leapt at the real one, its limbs twisting unnaturally as it grabbed him. Its face split open like a blooming flower, revealing a mass of writhing tendrils. Garza screamed as the thing latched onto his head, the tendrils burrowing into his helmet. Blood sprayed inside the visor as he collapsed, convulsing. Elena fired at her own doppelganger, the plasma bolt catching it in the chest. The thing staggered but didn't fall. Instead, its skin peeled away, revealing the same translucent, veined flesh as the creature from the portal. Black fluid oozed from the wound, hissing as it hit the ground. "Move! Go now!" Vance shouted, his voice breaking with urgency. The remaining team members ran, their breaths ragged, the sounds of the doppelganger's pursuit echoing behind them. As they neared the surface, the tunnel walls began to shift again, closing in like a living throat. Elena glanced back and saw the duplicates standing at the edge of the darkness, watching them retreat. Their blank smiles lingered in her mind long after they disappeared from view. When they finally emerged into the dim Martian sunlight, they collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. The injured engineer was dead, his body already showing signs of the black-veined corruption. Vance slammed his fist against the ground, his face contorted with anger and despair. "We can't go back," he said, his voice shaking. "Whatever's in those tunnels, it's not just alive, it's spreading." Elena looked back at the tunnel entrance, now pulsing faintly as if breathing. Her stomach churned as she realized the truth. "It's not just spreading," she whispered. "It's waiting." Continuation of the story, coming soon.